Hello! As you may have guessed, this is Emma from Beanbag Books, and as you may have guessed, it has been a long time since I filmed last. Turns out that moving and getting sick for the third time in the same month can kind of delay your filming schedule a little bit. But fortunately, or I suppose unfortunately, if you're only following this channel out of a weird sense of pity for my attempt at making creative content about my intense reading hobby, I'm back! So it turns out I read a lot of books in December, and I kind of didn't want to do a video with just talking about all of them as a wrap-up because I thought that that would be too cumbersome, and last time I delayed my wrap-up and ended up talking about way too many books, so I decided to try to split them up thematically a little bit. And this video specifically is about a project I decided to do in December in which I took all of the books I 5-starred in 2020, there were 5 of them, and decided to read a book by each of those authors in December of 2021, in the hopes that I would end up 5-starring a few more books than I thought I was going to. I still didn't end up 5-starring very many books, but at least I tried. So if you haven't been around that long, I'll tell you the books that I 5-starred in 2020. They were Less by Andrew Greer, The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and of course it was translated by Lucia Graves. I read the English version because I'm lazy. The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay, and The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. If you want to be technical about it, I did read The Mothers by Brit Bennett in January 2021, way back, so I've kind of already talked about it on the channel. I did it in like a January wrap-up. Brit Bennett hasn't written any other books besides The Vanishing Half and The Mothers, so I couldn't read a third book by her this month, or this past month. I'm going to talk about it a little bit here for the sake of continuity. If you want a little bit more detailed, okay, way more detailed, explanation of what I thought of it, then you can go back to my January wrap-up. However, I would not recommend that because it's a very old video and I was not very good at making videos yet, so prepare to be disappointed. So to be quick, this book is about a Black community in Southern California, and it centers on a teen couple who gets pregnant and they decide that they're going to have an abortion. The reason it's called The Mothers is, of course, to do with this pregnancy that dominates the narrative, but also because the story is kind of framed by the first-person plural voice of the mothers of the church that this couple attends. This is a Brit Bennett book, so it's naturally gripping and fascinating and complex, and the characters feel incredibly realistic. They also make a lot of mistakes, so be prepared for that. And of course, the book isn't quite as good as The Vanishing Half, but even I was not optimistic enough to expect that, so I was pretty satisfied with The Mothers. I quite enjoyed it. I would recommend reading The Vanishing Half first, though, to get a feel for Brit Bennett's writing style, and I would give this one like 4 stars. It was good. I liked it. Okay, now let's move on to the books I actually read in December 2021. As you might remember, I 5-starred Less by Andrew Greer in 2020, and I decided to pick The Confessions of Max Tivoli by the same author to read in December. If you've seen the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett and that cool lady who swam the English Channel, I don't know the actress who plays her, but she was a really cool character, and I just want to shout her out a little bit. Or if you read the original F. Scott Fitzgerald story, then you already kind of know what this book is about. It's a man who's born old and then ages backwards throughout his life. Interestingly, Andrew Greer did not get the idea for this book through either the F. Scott Fitzgerald story or the movie. He said he actually got it from a Bob Dylan song. I don't remember which one because I am a human being and sometimes I forget things. I think the star of this book is definitely Andrew Greer's writing. The book is set at the beginning in the, I think, 1870s in San Francisco, and the end of it takes place, I think, in the 1930s when the man is much older / I guess younger. And Andrew Greer is just really good at nailing that 19th century writing style without making it sound laborious or too modern. It also sounds like him, at least as I remember from Less, even though it is quite different, and I'm not really sure how he did this, but I'm very impressed. You can kind of tell that the guy just like knocked back classics like candy when he was a kid, because I think he ingested a lot of that like Victorian writing style with like the really rich descriptions. So yeah, does a fantastic job with that. There's some good character work here too. I really like the stuff about Max's best friend Huey and his mom. There is some interesting stuff about the woman he loves who crops up at different times within the narrative. Of course, she's aging in the correct direction, so They kind of like start far apart and then get closer together and then get far apart again. And the book also talks about how Max might not understand this woman quite as much as he really thinks that he does, and that's neatly like seeded throughout the narrative. However, the book is so consumed by his relationship with this one woman that I was kind of frustrated because I really wanted it to focus on different aspects of his life and the people that he knew. Like, he has a sister that we barely hear about, and I really wanted to know more about her, for example. In The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, the movie, they expanded on a lot of characters that Benjamin Button knew, not just Kate Blanchett's character Daisy, who's his love interest, and so I was hoping for more of that in this book, but I didn't quite get it. Also, this is definitely going to happen in a book of this nature, but simply because we have a guy who at one point in his life is very young but looks old, and then is quite old but looks young. I'm just gonna say there's some weird moments in here. It's almost weirder at the end of the book when he's really an old guy but he looks like he's a young guy. It walks a fine line. Whether or not it crosses it depends on, I guess, how skeeved out you get by age gap relationships, or, you know, kind of immortality tropes, especially, I know in Greek mythology this happens where like somebody looks really young but they're actually really old. It's like a whole thing. So even though this book definitely had a lot of problems, I think that the writing is gorgeous. It was definitely enough to keep me invested. And I just really like Andrew Sean Greer's observations on humanity, so I'll give it 3 stars. Another book I 5-starred in 2020 was Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay, and for this challenge I decided to pick up Bad Feminist, which is an essay collection by her. If you've heard of one book by her, it's probably this one, so it might surprise you that I like her so much and I haven't read it already, but here we are. I didn't realize how many essays are in this book. It's like 40, and as a result, they don't all necessarily fit incredibly well under the, commentary about feminism category. There's sort of a mixture of race, gender, and overall social commentary, and also some cultural criticism thrown in there too. One thing I do like about Roxane Gay and the entirety of this collection is I really like her ability to sort of recognize the complexity of the way people interact with each other while also remaining firm in her own convictions and beliefs. The best of the essays, I think, show this very, very well. There's one in particular about a Quentin Tarantino movie. I think it's Django. Django Unchained, that's the name of the movie. Sorry, I only know books, not movies. Where she does a very good job of acknowledging what the movie does well, but also what it really, really gets wrong, especially in terms of how it portrays race relations. I sometimes felt like Roxane Gay wasn't quite putting that same effort into every one of these essays, though. Some of them didn't go quite as deep as I wanted them to, and I was a little frustrated by that. Or they went in a direction that I was a little bit less interested in occasionally. But in general, this was a really good companion for a long drive home for the holidays, which is when I listened to it. It was kind of like having your really smart best friend who you haven't seen in a long time sit next to you in the car and just talk to you for 6 hours about movies that she's seen and books that she's read, and you just go, oh, that's smart. I hadn't thought of that. So yeah, it was fun. I listened to the audiobook, obviously, was not reading while I was driving, and it was read by Bahni Turpin, whose work I have liked in other audiobooks, and I also quite liked her work here. Next book I 5-starred in 2021 was The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and as I said before, was translated by Lucia Graves. And I decided to pick up, rather than the next in the series for this challenge, a different standalone novel. And so I chose Marina, which is one of his young adult novels. It's translated by the same person as well. So this book is about a kid named Oscar who lives in Barcelona. He is an orphan, or maybe he's not an orphan. I think maybe his family just hates him, but it comes out to the same thing. His family's not there. And one day he stumbles across the beautiful old mansion of a girl named Marina and her father, who's an artist, but somehow has a lot of money. It's explained later, don't worry about it. Marina and Oscar become good friends, and he comes to visit them a lot, and in the course of this happening, they also get caught up in this mystery in the city of Barcelona, which involves a fallen tycoon who became famous for some perhaps slightly shady activities, but is a pretty complicated person overall. A little bit like the guy in The Shadow of the Wind. I can't say too much because I'll spoil it, but there are many allusions to Frankenstein, and for good reason. I think I've already said too much. You should turn off this video. Unfortunately, I do think that out of everything I read for this project, this was probably the biggest disappointment. Zafón has been criticized for a lot of maybe problematic writing tropes that he employs. And when I was reading The Shadow of the Wind, I didn't think any of that stuff was that big of a deal. A few things include his treatment of women characters as kind of manic pixie dream girls, or the overly melodramatic nature of his subplots, or also his propensity to have people go and talk to different characters who then word vomit their backstories in this kind of clumsy expositional way. None of that stuff really bothered me in The Shadow of the Wind. I still loved it. But reading Marina, I was like, all right, I see what you guys are saying. Marina really is kind of a manic pixie dream girl. I think that she walks very close to the line and sometimes crosses it. She's extraordinarily beautiful. She's daring. She's artistic. And she's always challenging Oscar to do new things. And that can sometimes be a little bit much, I guess. But I think that that would not have been so bad had the book focused more on their relationship together rather than shoehorning in this super dramatic tycoon plot. I think that the book being shorter than The Shadow of the Wind really makes a difference, because in The Shadow of the Wind we have time for everything to develop and get tied inextricably together. But in this book, I felt like the two plots really didn't mesh well together. I was like, why are they both in the same book? This doesn't make any sense. When the characters were in one plot, they weren't saying anything about the other plot. It really was like they were two different stories. So I would have preferred that the book just be this nice slice of life of these two friends getting to know each other, but I guess that's not Zafón's style. Oops. So the book wasn't like bad. I would probably give it like a 2.5-ish star rating. I was pretty sick when I was reading it, and it was at least mildly entertaining, so sure, I'll give it that. And it was kind of cute in places too. And the final book I read to finish up this challenge was, drumroll, Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. In The Hate U Give, Star's dad, Maverick, was one of my favorite characters, and when I learned that he was going to be getting his own novel, I was really excited, and so that was the next one I wanted to read. So when the book starts, we already know that Maverick had a short fling with his friend's girlfriend, and he has gotten her pregnant, and DNA testing has recently confirmed that he is the father of her young son. It's also evident that she is tired of taking care of him and really doesn't want to put forth too much more responsibility, so Maverick decides that he needs to step up and start taking care of this kid too. He comes up with a name for the baby, and if you've read The Hate U Give, then you know what it is. If you happen to have been reading this book before The Hate U Give, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but it does happen, I won't spoil it for you, but try not to laugh at him, okay? He's just a kid, he's trying. No, JK, it really is a nice name when you think about it. However, that isn't the only issue that Maverick faces. He's trying to graduate high school, he is trying to convince his ex-girlfriend Lisa to get back with him again, and of course he has some family situations dealing with the gangs in the neighborhood. Angie Thomas is straight up just one of the best YA authors writing today. It's a fact. I'm right and I should say it. I'm getting to the point where in my mid-20s, I am not always super interested in reading YA anymore. It gets a little bit frustrating when all people talk about are stupid love triangles and stubborn teenage girls who are somehow both plain and stunningly beautiful. But Angie Thomas is definitely one of the best out there, and though I did not love this book quite as much as The Hate U Give, partly because I felt that The Hate U Give had a pretty direct plot line running through it to help propel the story along, and Concrete Rose felt a little bit directionless at times. I still really came to care for not only Maverick, who I already loved, but the other characters in the book, his mom and dad, his cousin, the guy who employs him at the general store where he works. There's a lot of little Easter eggs for people who have read The Hate U Give, but I still think you could enjoy this book if you haven't already read that. Wow, that actually took a lot less time than I thought, but I won't bore you with all the other books that I read in December of 2021. I'll just have to save that for another wrap-up. Have you ever gone back to an author that you really loved previously and realized that their other books just weren't doing it for you? If you have, let me know in the comments. Thanks as always for watching, or at least for hitting play while you're doing something else, because I get views for it. And I hope you have a great start to your new year. See you soon.